and welcome to Toward a Quality of Life, coming to you from the Roxbury studio of BNN TV, Boston, Massachusetts. This is the first of a multi-part series on our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. How you all doing? I'm here to give another lecture on the ongoing political drama, Obama for Obama, kind of government and presidency that we have. And I'm sure that even if you remain a devotee and a loyal follower of the president, you still might have a little bit of a qualification considering finally one of the many, many untruths, to use a kind word about it, is really hitting home to people and grabbing people in a way that heretofore none of the other transgressions could. I'm calling this Obama drama because, and I call him Obama drama, because he has put our country through hell. Now, many of you will sit there saying, "Cracker, get off the air." Or you'll say, "What about George Bush?" You'll rise from your couch. We're not talking about George Bush. He put us through some serious thing too, but not in this way. George Bush was very clear of what his intentions were. He didn't run a narrative, and not particularly. He was simplistic in that respect, just plain and to the point. But here we have a series of events that have zigged and zagged us since day one into extremes of emotion in all kinds of ways, and we've been through hell. We've been on the edge of cliffs. We've been crying greatly in admiration. We've been strewn all over the place, maintaining that hope. And I always told you, I've done many lectures on this president because he has alarmed me so since the day he ever became a serious contender. I've always told you that, ladies and gentlemen, Obama is for Obama. And you'll say, well, which president isn't? Presidents must take the country into consideration as human beings, not just their own vainglorious motivations and ends that they seek. And for the most part, they do, thinking, geez, they wouldn't want to upset people by just being concerned on how they look to the world, how they look to history, and make sure that they look great and almighty. The first thing I'm going to start with, though this is not what the lecture is about this new currency going around where, and of course the proverbial stuff has hit the fan again, and whenever it does, that's when the racist charges come out. And they're coming out much more again, and the minions that support not so much the person of the president, because they do see these faults, but the end justifying the means, even if the means are very horrible, deceitful, and devious. But many of these supports, if you will, or establishments behind the president trying to get the country into the so-called progressive mode are now talking about a white grievance industry, the new word instead of racism. And of course, still maligning the Tea Party. And I want to take a moment to talk about what it is that is getting people to say, give me my country back. I want my country back. Does it mean that it does not want so-called darker-skinned people or people from other countries or people that aren't wealthy? Does it mean that? Or what does it really mean when people say, I want my country back? I see where a professor of sociology or some discipline such as that at Stony Brook wrote an article for the Huffington Post, of course, where he said that what this Tea Party and factions that want their government back, that they are white males, they are breadwinners, they had a sense of manhood, and now they have increasing job competition and the whole housing bubble thing, and so they are a white grievance industry. on that basis. And I want to say to you that black or white or red or blue, no one, and you must admit, in this country has heard of anything the likes of what this person who is president has done. And that's what getting this country and freedom back is all about. We've not heard of things like he has proposed and done, but you might hear of them in North Korea, Cuba, Russia, maybe, but not heretofore in the United States of America. What people want to do is reclaim liberty, and I can attest, freedom is the thing that means the most to me ever, ever, ever. And Bayard Rustin, who passed away some time ago and is a sort of not well known but very important civil rights leader, was on Oprah once long ago explaining that he had been around the world fomenting and helping with revolutions, had been born in the U.S. in the South, and had not enough to eat as a child. But he said, with all of his experience, even with starving somewhat as a child, nothing is more precious than freedom. Freedom to speak, freedom to worship, freedom to pray, freedom to say, we don't like what you're doing, Mr. President. The individual, this is a country. Why do they say they want the country back? Now, you can disagree with it. I'm giving you the dialectic of what it means when people say they want the country back. The individual against the whole. This country was built on individual motivation, individual self-reliance, individual movement towards whatever one could achieve to the best of one's ability. It wasn't about spread it and drag everybody with you. Now, you may disagree. You may disagree. And ladies and gentlemen, please excuse me for a moment because I've been told by the staff that we're having audio difficulties. So there's an interruption in the flow of what I was saying, but I'm going to resume now, and I hope I can pick it up at a good spot of where I left off. So here we are. We were talking about what it means when people say, I want my country back. I want my freedom back. The individual against the whole. Now, just to show you a counter example against about individual against the whole, when this whole healthcare problem became very obvious and concrete in recent days, the president and the people who speak on his behalf were all saying, hey, only 5 million people are affected. What's the big deal? Only 5 million had their health care policies canceled. Only 5 million. And of course we know now it's projected that 40 to 50 million in the coming year or two are going to also be losing supposedly. But anyway, in this country, the individual had the rights up until now to make his way. The paths were cleared. The streets were paved. The administration of governments was such that people had rights to the pursuit of happiness, to freedom, to liberty, to what they could do in terms of enterprise to enrich themselves and become more productive economically, commercially. I admit that in the previous administration and the times we've been coming into, that the system of being able to amass wealth is exaggerated and overboard. But this is not the solution. This is not the answer. This is not the way for well-thinking individuals to proceed. And by the way, you know I've told you many times that the person who is president is a student of Saul Alinsky, who taught how to do a revolution quietly, a sort of a silent revolution where you overthrow the government without people really realizing it. And the person who is president has studied that directive and, in fact, called it as having been seared into my brain, the Saul Alinsky method of overtoppling societies according to a communist. And if you know what communism is, see if you like communism. I guarantee you don't. Because no matter where you sit on the totem pole, especially if you sit on the lower rungs, you will definitely be even worse off in communism, and to boot won't be able to gripe about it. Just to show you, too, when GM was taken over in the first year after the person became president, they did have a motto about it being a revolution. That didn't last very long, but as the government took it over there for a while, there was a motto of it being a revolution. And just recently, I see a new ad for the healthcare sign-ups and so on, which say, join the revolution. Join the revolution. Okay, now back to the freedoms that people want in taking back their country. Free to be, get the government off your back. The government cannot tell you what to do. By the way, in this country historically, the government doesn't dictate. It doesn't choose which laws it wants to obey or not obey or throw away. The government is supposed to serve you. Admittedly, it's been getting less so, but never has it jumped to this extent of lack of freedom and the ability of people to tell their government, you guys, S-U-C-K. Individual liberty, inviolable rights that this country is famous for, that people still want to get to, that still want to come to this country to get these freedoms, to get these opportunities, to get this standard of living, which, ladies and gentlemen, over the past 5 years has been going down, down, down. And by the end of this term, with these kind of so-called policies enacted, you ain't seen nothing yet for how poor we can become. But people have inviolable rights in this country, according to our Constitution and Declaration of Independence and laws, to practice religion. This president omits God. He omitted God from the Declaration several times. He omitted God from a PBS thing they did where every president recited the Gettysburg Address, and there's God in there. He omitted it. We have rights to practice religion. We have right to own guns. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, not illegal guns. And that the government has no good trace on where guns come from and how they end up in the trunk of someone's car to be sold on the black market. It's unbelievable. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about legal, properly registered guns. Why? Because you cannot have a situation where only the police and only the military and only the government has guns. To speak freely, to say, we don't like you. I mean, there were times in this country when President Johnson, for example, was called a pig to his face. So don't think these are new slurs. We have put presidents through calling them every name in the book for time immemorial, and that is our right. Try that in China. Try that in North Korea. Try that in Russia. Look at Pussy Riot, whatever their name is, the rock band in Russia. They put them in jail for opposing the government, just verbally. And one of them is sent to Siberia now. Last I read, not even known from. Young girls who are in a rock band. Speak your mind. Okay. And not only that, you remember the times, and I've done the piece on Pelosi as she's smiling away to pass the health care bill that day, and people are begging, screaming as she walks along a road she normally didn't take, just to sort of rub it in the faces of the so-called protesters. People were yelling and screaming about what's going to be with this health care bill, that it's not going to work right. And look, not only that, their speaking freely turned out to be correct. Now, this person who is president has had a war on Fox News. He's tried to, all right, so you don't like Fox News, but guess what? If you don't watch Fox News or read Drudge Report and you only get MSNBC's, see, not only will you get two different attitudes, admittedly, the right and the left, so to speak, easily to categorize it, you will lose tons of news, real stuff that's happening, because MSNBC, that pretty much is orchestrated by the White House and CNN, and New York Times and all the newspapers that go along with it, they're not going to give you stories that you need to know, whether you like the tone of those stories or not. In this administration, if you don't agree, you're an enemy. And one time the president was talking to Latin American persons and told them, Punish your enemies. Punish them. In other words, people that don't want immigration or presumably don't like darker skin. We've come in incredibly. We have longer to go. Has the race issue ever been opened up, exposed, and chewed on and thrashed out amongst us, which it really needs to do? And I've put up a sign in this TV station to ask for persons who might be willing to get into something like that for a show to please contact me. If anyone out there would care to do that, we need to do that. But it's not been done. Remember the silly, quiet, put it on mute thing at the table in the yard of the White House with the police person and the professor from Harvard that early on, and they had a race conference, but no sound, and the camera was on them for an hour as they sat quietly there. And then, of course, the president said, oh, we've got a lot more, we'll be following up on this. Of course, never happened. Like so many times he said, we'll be following up on this. Never happens. Okay. Freedom from excess taxation. Remember the dumping of the tea early on, the Tea Party. Okay, so republics and democracies are people over the government, not government over the people. And that's what people mean when they see their country changing so drastically that it bears no resemblance to the one that they cherish and have and would like to maintain. And how long can we afford to tippy-toe and be fragile with the president considering the suffering of the country? And ladies and gentlemen, look around you. We have an increasingly permanent underclass. Where are those jobs going to come from? When the immigration bill, if it does happen, imagine where we'll be then with no jobs to... What is going to happen here? And the education system in such a turmoil, and the resources, as money is squandered since day one of this presidency, will continue to dry up, and then you're going to see all the basic things you thought you were used to, that you took for granted, that other people in other countries do not have as basics. You won't be seeing those anymore. And when we have someone like a Herman Cain, who I like very much, running for president, who really did accomplish things, who really did work his way up the corporate ladder and into the Federal Reserve Board, unbelievable career, that he didn't do it because somebody had to give him a chance as a black person. He did it because he made results every step of the way. He made results. And that's one thing I'm going to explain if we have enough time today. This president does not produce results. Never. So, basically, you can call what's going on here, if you're of the persuasion that you don't just want to sit by and hope the manna comes down from heaven, we have a war against achievement and self-reliance. Really, we do. Personal achievement and self-reliance. This is the second of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy president, number 44. We enter a lecture in progress. Freedom and government do not go together. A government is something to keep at bay and to be very careful of it overstepping its bounds. And by the way, religion is a real no-no in a progressive, communistically oriented society, because progressivism is the religion, and two religions cannot coexist. And according, if you really follow, and you're saying, where do you get all this from? You cannot just listen to the person who is president, take those words as for granted, and know nothing else. We're a very ignorant population. But anything I'm telling you is well researched from what are the reliable sources of information, and you can Google anything of what I say and find it, to the extent that reliable sources are reliable, but the ones that today we feel are reliable. Reuters, Associated Press, etc., etc. And, you know, in Obama land, God doesn't give us rights. Hell, God doesn't even count. Because humans are going to control everybody. And humans are going to make, quote unquote, social justice. God makes justice. And God doesn't give us our rights. The government does. Whatever, according to this guy, according to whatever they want to give you, it's up to them. And whatever they want you to have to do, it's up to them. And I want to bring out one more thing here. That recently, Oprah was being interviewed and was asked about, does she think that there's racism against the president? And she said that the office was disrespected and that it's due to racism. When Joe Wilson, the representative, during one of those, what was it, I forgot, was it a State of the Union, I think, called out, "You lie," as the president gave his speech. And guess what? He was lying at the time. And the next day, they fixed it very rapidly. And it was something to do with whether persons who are illegal in the country will be able to be part of the exchanges on this health care. But guess what? Just as Joe Wilson did what he did, and so much lying had gone on, which you don't understand, the only thing the president does do publicly is lie. And I've explained this to you before. He believes in having a narrative. He says the reason something didn't go down right is because we didn't tell them a story the way it would be effective. And I can prove lies that I have a list of that goes from here to eternity, and I've told you about them before, and if we get a chance, I'll quickly just name them again today. But he himself, the president, on the other hand, did two such similar things. On one occasion, he invited the opposition, who had I think it was over a budget plan or whatever, to be in the front at his inaugural, as though, maybe we will have something, to work on. So sit over, come and be in the inaugural in the front row. Then when he had him there in front of the world, he humiliated him verbally in front of the whole world. And he did the same thing again at another speech, I think it was a State of the Union, with the Supreme Court. He called them out in front of the whole world as they sat right in front of him. Because part of Saul Alinsky, too, is to ridicule people. Very important to the Alinsky technique is to divide people and ridicule and harden positions against each other. And Lord knows this president has been very effective in that. Lord knows this president from day one, when he first met the Republicans, said to them, when they went over for the first drink at the White House to, schmooze together, they thought, wow, we'll tell him what we're thinking, he'll tell us what he's thinking. When they told him what they're thinking, because there has to be a give and take. You may not like what some of the right does, you may not like what some of the left does, but in a democracy, in a republic, and in a Congress, and between the branches of government, we sit down and you get something and I get something. That's how deals and legislations are made. But this president said from day one, I won. That was his answer to them. I won. And then Nancy Pelosi said in the Congress, when the Republicans wanted their part in it, we won. Another thing is so many social things have been perpetrated on the people besides all these straight-ahead political things. And you cannot force, gee, my earring is not being very behaved today. You cannot force people to feel or say or be some way that they really don't feel. That's very dangerous and it's very bad because the truth of what people feel is still inside of them. And it's better to let the truth come out as long as they don't harm anybody physically. You should follow what you really believe in your heart with limits as to what you can do to somebody. You cannot physically, in any way, shape, or form, or materially obstruct somebody else's right to live and say what he or she wants to say or do. So this president will tell you what to do and how you will live. And so are all these writers who are around him, the small circle of screwballs, basically. Wolves in sheep's clothing, nuts, really. Constantly busy working away how they're going to make people fit the mold of their control system that they are trying to put into place. And by the way, from the terms that I'm describing here, this president, not in elevating the country, not in bringing more jobs to people, not in bringing great education, not in coming in when he had the funds and the Treasury still had the money, not in going into the places that needed the good schools and the best teachers and just funding it to beat the band and having lots of daycare centers. No, nothing like that. Nothing like that. But not what the policies have been, not what the effect has been. It's been a zigzag and it's been a mess, and we're in a very tough situation. We are very much worse off. When this presidency started, we were in dire straits economically, and we still are, and we needed all this to be put in place, and we got everything but. Every kind of plan and zigzag to this, to that, other than what you would think is like obviously the needs of the country, to protect all the services we give to the handicapped, to protect services to mental health, to protect services to Medicaid, to protect Social Security, to make jobs, to give ways for kids to be taken care of, for kids to learn, for kids to get an education. Just that. That's what the country needed. And this president and his people have contempt for those who are not obedient to them. Besides that, they believe in just ignoring them, excluding them, and telling them, I won't negotiate, when the system is built on negotiation. So, back to this Tea Party and why people want their country back. If the government doesn't respect the people don't respect the government. The one that believes the government should dig itself, and I say to Obama, hey you, get off my cloud. Don't hang around, boy. Two's a crowd on my cloud, baby. And this president is very reminiscent of Richard Nixon. Very sneaky, underhanded, tricky, and really bad scandals. A ton of them, not just one. And for this president, it seems that race is not really his thing. It's a thing. But for this president, class seems to be the big deal. And control of what people say, do, think, feel, smell, you name it. That seems to be the biggest. And like I told you before, too, I believe his time in prestigious school in Hawaii, when everybody presumably was quite wealthy, presumably mostly white, and probably some Hawaiians, I'm just guessing, this might have not been, that would have helped, besides the great detachments and very messed up beginning. This is a wretched person who suffers serious character disorder, which I hope I have time to get into today. And when it comes to, again, the idea of racism, Oprah saying that The Office was disrespected and that this is racism, and the idea that people want their country back, don't you remember all the white people, and they're still out there, swaying and crying. They couldn't believe it. And the columns in Colorado, oh my God, Jesus Christ got elected president. And I know some to this day, white people, who cannot get him out from under their skin, no matter what he does. So let's not forget that. Let's not forget the vast support, and all the people that support him, all the very wealthy in Congress and in news circles and in diplomatic circles who walk on thick carpets in beautiful shoes that cost a lot of money. Oh, they care about the poor, all those, and they're mostly white people. Okay, Barry was his name. Did you know that he was always called Barry Obama up in Chicago until he became a candidate for president? But anyway, all right, so he was coronated. Hail Caesar. And I want to also mention here quickly, too, that beyond some of the curbs on individual freedom and what this country stands for, there has been a drastic buildup of the police state in these past several years. Tons of guns and ammunition have been purchased for various departments. Look it up, Google it, people. You will find tons of information about it. And the IRS was going to enforce the health care law, hired 16,000 more agents, and got a ton of guns and ammunition. Lord only knows why. And whistleblowers are more intimidated than they've ever been at any time that we know of in modern history by this administration. And even if they're telling us things that we need to know that are good things to whistleblow about it. And SWAT teams are going around. Police have these armored vehicles now like they do in Iraqi and Afghani areas for war, and all the latest equipment, and so many hits to families, to businesses have been made in recent time, and it's getting more and more heavy-duty policing SWAT team kind of a country. Can you imagine? So the administration in place, and they don't care who the symbolic figurehead is. Again, they follow the philosophy that the end justifies the means. And I don't think we have enough time to get into that today, but briefly speaking, it means that you'll do whatever it takes to get there, and you're okay with it, because you feel what happened, even though people are killed along the way, their lives are destroyed along the way, whatever it is, the end justifies the means. And it's been argued in history that that is a very not moral or proper kind of position to be in, to take. But this administration, and they're very busy because everything came rolling out, one thing after another, into this society that was ill-prepared for it, because what did we think when we elected Barack Obama to be president? Didn't we think he'd go in and help the inner city? You betcha. Didn't we think he'd start just really rolling up his sleeves, staying at home, not giving speeches, 47 in 1 week of October alone, just really start getting serious of how we're going to get this economy going. And guess what? The wealthiest people are making a windfall during his administration, while the poor and the middle are getting poorer every day. So the support all around him of these progressives who had all these ideas, and healthcare was not his original idea in the late new book to come out by acolytes of him, Halperin being one of them. I forgot the other guy's name at the moment. They worship at his altar. But they explain and they describe in there, because they have to put something in the book, how for the first term someone suggested to him health care, and he ran with that. And in the second term, he said, what am I going to have for an agenda now, according to this book? Now, you would believe that this health care burned in his heart. When he reads a speech, you would believe it burns in his heart. Meanwhile, he's golfing, he's partying, he's riding jets, living large. That's another thing of communism. You can bet the rulers, and those aren't presidents. The dictators, those aren't presidents. Presidents just manage in between. I'm talking rulers and dictators. You can bet they live large. And he's using government like a toy. The money that has gone down the tube from the stupid stimulus bill that gave gifts to all his cohorts, went nowhere for the economy, to all the loans or money he gave to companies that failed, that were to the healthcare thing where fraudulent companies of known fraud under FBI investigation, Michelle Obama's classmate owning one of them, were given the contracts and have been given more since the problem, even though it is well known they had a terrible record. Obama is in unreality and fantasy too, and you might not get that because he seems so normal on the outside. And Obama is all about the greater glory of Obama. I remember in the first year, when some high school kids in Washington, D.C. had gotten some money to go to charter school through the government, and they were doing great. And when Obama came in, he wants no charter school, so he was discontinuing that. They begged, please let us stay, we're doing so great. They were disallowed. This has been the second of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. Please tune in again for more of this lecture. Thank you. This is the third of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. We enter a lecture in progress. And the worst thing about the health care bill, in spite of it, I'm not going to go through all the horrible things that, and I've talked about this before. I'm for universal health care. Many times we've sat at this couch at BNN TV with physicians and representatives of their society talking about national health care and what should be in it and how we could get there before any of this happened. This was a few years ago. Those same people didn't even get to speak when the first hearings were heard. They were not allowed. The so-called public option, the one-payer system, universal health care, I believe, should be a right. Should be a need that has to be fulfilled by society. But this law, so bad, made in such a short period of time, it should take a good 6 to 8 years to make a proper law. Remember, do you remember how it was pushed and everyone was exhausted and it was Christmas and they stayed there at Christmas Eve, and I always say we're at Ramadan, that would not have happened. But the worst thing, this is a horrible, horrible bill, and the worst thing it's going to do is it's going to ruin what medicine we do have. And I'm a big critic of medicine as it exists. But you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If I were bleeding to death, I'd run to the hospital for Western medicine. And it's going to really bring down the greatness of the level that this country has achieved in the medical arts. That's the worst thing that's going to happen, is medicine as we know it is going to be a PISS poor derivative of what we have now. And guess what? Doctors are being let go by insurance companies because they've got to figure how to get the cost down with the situation as it is. And who are they going to get rid of if not the more qualified, elder, experienced, and those are the ones you want, who take more time with the patients, charge more money? You can bet. Is it going to be the new whippersnappers that are still wet behind the ears, like you always get when you go to the emergency room, or even if you stay in the hospital? Oh, what we are losing with this fiasco. And the unbelievable thing, too, is everyone is talking now about how insecure. It has no security features at all to your private information. All the experts testified to the Congress, and to a person, they said, totally insecure. But the irony of that is there are the HIPAA laws on people like myself and other people who work in the medical industry, where you can't breathe, you can't allow an email, you can't allow a U.S. mail, you can't allow a scintilla of information about someone to ever escape or not just be routed through certain channels. It's such a restrictive thing, and yet here we have a so-called law that's wide open in terms of security. What an irony. So, just briefly on the healthcare, more cost to you, death panels, absolutely. And Sarah Palin, much maligned for saying so, Howard Dean used the term a few weeks ago, that there are death panels. And you can bet, when you've got diabetes, when you've got a heart condition, you can bet, over time, pretty soon, you're not going to be sent to whatever tests or treatments are available. It's going to be measured, what's the chance, how long will this give you? Well, let's go with a more productive 40-year-old who will get more out of us paying the money, etc. Guess what? In this healthcare law, people are allowed to visit your home and see if children are okay and so forth. They're allowed to come into the home, not with somebody making a complaint. And you know, they talk about this healthcare is going to be great. They're going to make you eat certain food. They're going to make you work out. They're going to make you, follow preventative. Nothing can prevent the stress that's on you, and that stress is not going down. That stress is going up, and stress kills. You know, just think of how outrageous where we are right now is. And if this guy who's president doesn't deserve criticism royale. And secondly, because, the head's so big and, he needed the Colosseum there with the columns, nothing on him. He's great. And I worry when a person of this disposition is up against the wall, what does he do? But just consider the United States of America. After the website came out, I happened to walk out onto Boylston Street, and I saw all the buildings and businesses, and I said, you gotta be kidding. You've got to be kidding. People, can we be clear? It's impossible to make an incomplete, so poorly not really designed, clunky, ridiculous, unqualified, unprofessional website, because I hear it has 500 million lines of code, which is more than even the greatest intelligence programs that are made, and is just too Rube Goldberg confusing, complicated. Ridiculous and unsuitable. And I think to myself, Amazon.com, American Express. I don't like corporations. I don't believe in corporations. But I know enough about IT, and so should the president, and so should anybody in a position around that White House. And so should that screwball who runs HHS that doesn't lose her job and even has a smarmy attitude at the Congress. Are you kidding me? I say, how could it? Any firm of it worth its weight could have been hired to do this the way it should be done, and it's so doable. Think of how low we have sunk, that something like this could be perpetrated on the country. The United States, where the water runs relatively clean and the air runs relatively clean compared to China, compared to Czechoslovakia, compared to Russia, where high-order design and IT, and I'm not favorable to IT even, but where the best and the greatest have emanated. How can this happen? Hell, it wouldn't have happened in Tobago. All right. And like I said, some of those players have gotten more contracts since this erupted. And of course, now all that money is down the tube, and it's probably going to end up that private people will be hired, and then they're going to have to charge a fortune. And imagine people, ain't this the icing on the cake? Maybe some of those are the freedom-loving people who've got their act together and had their health care. Even if you have Medicaid, whatever, that's a very personal thing. But imagine what people are suffering, especially even if they don't have a condition, that they're not insured at the moment. Only 5 million. Only just 5 million. And yet this country has a spirit that cannot be repressed. Because in spite of all the crazy zigzag and contrary to business, and I'm not commercially market-oriented, just let's go at the market only to the end of time, but we do have to make an economy. That the people of the country still manage somehow to get up every day and get through somehow to do something, because, the statistics are slightly changing in spite of all this stuff, in spite of all the worries, in spite of costs they can't know about with the health care and all the other regulations that have come down the pipe. And by the way, he makes regulations like by the hundreds. Thousands have been made. Unbelievable. So much you have to read one regulation to find out the other regulation to find. And the healthcare thing is thousands and thousands and thousands of pages. I saw some of the stuff coming through. Unbelievable what they're giving to providers to have to go through technically in this new healthcare situation. Health uncare. But the people can't be repressed. There's a work ethic in this country. There's a spirit of motivation. And still people are managing somehow with great stress. Now, I said to you before, and I think this might be a good place, we're going to take a break, and I think we'll stop here, and we'll start in a short while. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're back from the break, and we will continue. Now, I had mentioned to you in this lecture that the president's history of actual results and accomplishments is pretty much zero. You could say Bin Laden, I know, maybe. But the SEALs did that, even though he said, I did this and I did that, okay? So, it does give him some credit, but he took way too much credit, and I doubt any of us would want to have him in a foxhole or as a business partner. It doesn't seem like the kind of guy who would be out there really taking the bull by the horns, so to speak. All right. Now, and I sort of alluded to the idea that in terms of destroying the country, wreaking havoc on the country, dividing the country, polarizing the country, he's been a great success. A great success. And in terms of creating people who are more and more angry with him, he's been a great success. But you know what? All of us are hurting in this country. All of us. Every color, every creed, every age, every socioeconomic level, we're all hurting, and we're hurting more. Because this guy has no sense of the needs of the nation. It's more like what you're going to do. He's not able to care, really, and that's part of his character disorder. He may care about what you say of him and the fact that he's not going to take any blame for anything. Those things he cares about. And I believe he cares about his children. I'm not sure he cares about his wife. That's just my perception. He may. He certainly says he does. Okay. Now, Obama drama, as we continue. It's really considering the gains this country has made, and we are very, very young. We are a young country, let's say 1800, 1900, 300 or so years. If you count like the very beginnings, it's a very young country in comparison to others. And it's very outrageous, given the brief history that we know about, for us to be so confused and disabled and messed up with failure after failure. Lots of money gone, poorer and poorer, no results. And then coming up with, when I say everything but the needs of the nation, coming up with things like the war on women, coming up with Middle East situation, changing that to an Asia pivot, changing that to nuclear treaties, changing that to Pacific treaties, just zigging and zagging, always changing as need be, especially when things get hot and people are upset. But in practical terms, the president himself is only giving speeches, going golfing, having parties, which have not been as many as far as I can tell, or as grandiose as they had been in the past, one of them or two of them costing $1 million and more. But we have been all over the map. And meanwhile, what we really need to do is have places for the kids who don't have proper care to be cared for kids to be educated, just plain and simple, easy, straight ahead, and ideas and projects that will make jobs. Now, going back to the history of the president, when I say he's had no results, in Chicago, he had a huge contract with Bill Ayers and those people to change the education system in one or more of the schools of Chicago. The money was given by Annenberg. It turned out a bust. Nothing changed. And Valerie Jarrett, who's his close advisor and who, I read, is in the private quarters of the first family in the evenings. That's how close she is. And that hers was the idea to shut down all the memorials and all the parks and everything to make the people hurt during the shutdown. She presided in over Hyde Park a slum housing project where people didn't have heat in the depths of winter for a long time, lived in terrible conditions. So that's their record. That's the Obamas and their people. And the president's wife was part of a policy when she worked for a hospital there that got people of no means from a deprived area of the city, people of no means, not going to the local hospital, busing them 1 hour away to a different hospital. That's what she was part of a policy of. But back to the president. Actually, he suffers a very serious character disorder. I know that's hard to believe. Oh, he speaks so eloquently, and you take his word as gospel truth. Unbelievable. But he has fantasy. If you even see why his speech says he's going to stop the rise of the oceans, and I don't know what else because I don't listen to the speeches, but he says some. When he talked about health care in the early days, he talked about doctors sawing off limbs, of diabetics. He talks every time he has an example of someone that's been helped by one of his so-called policies. It turns out to be someone who really wasn't, or someone who had an opposite result. He's in fantasy. Nothing can you take to the bank and say, I can rely on what he's telling me. Absolutely. He's in fantasy and unreality. It's called character pathology. He's in his head. He's in his head. And nothing matters to him more than how great he does or does not look. And how great, and he's had a terrible history, and one can't blame him. He has detachment. Terrible history. Very difficult. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is a whole country. And you've got to, you can't have character pathology. Of course, we could say Clinton had he had pathology too of another sort. But you've got to know, you've got to be concerned and mostly working for the people that depend on you, not for how you look to the world and to history.
This is the fourth of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. We enter a lecture in progress.
Lie, 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 to be seen as great, to give you a narrative. How is he going to put it? He can't just come and tell you what's going on. What's the story he's going to make up about it? In his first year as president, when we were going to hell in a handbasket, when we were just reeling from the economic bust, he was working on the nuclear exchange and reduction with Russia, of which he was giving them more benefit than he was giving to ourselves. That's what he was working on. You know, he had these things like, I can be seen as the healthcare guy. I can be seen as the guy who reduced nuclear weapons. What he can be seen as, not what he really is doing. And not what he's really getting done properly. And not what he's doing that will preserve and enhance and lift up the country instead of make it worse off. He coerced the Rush into health care. He whipped them into action. There was nothing. In fact, it was semi-legal the way it was passed. And back then, people were much more like, oh, if Barry told us, we've got to do it. A little less now that their seats are in jeopardy. But still, he could rise again. I don't think he's down for the count. Now, Russia has suggested they want to put GPS monitors right on our soil for their own intelligence ends. Can you imagine? This is something being discussed. And doesn't Putin dribble him like a basketball? He's been humiliated on the world stage. The newspapers don't shout it because they're all just quietly hoping and praying. They want everything he does to work out, to go through, especially issues like abortion and the gay agenda, etc. Anti-religion, that's very in vogue now. Religion doesn't bother me one way or another. Leave religion alone. And project upon project, too, he started or said he was going to do, and he abandons. Constantly. The green agenda. He had an economic council that he got all the heads of corporations together, never attended, never had meetings, finally disbanded it. He even got rid of having security briefings. You're supposed to have them every day. He spent periods where he didn't have security briefings of what he needs to know. And it's been said, when Syria was having to be discussed, he's scrolling down his iPhone, chewing gum, looking around. In this acolytes' books who love him, they have to write something. You know, in a book, you can't just put, oh, he was fantastic and, you know. And isn't it interesting that every time, Jay Leno had a joke, that it's good that he holds press conferences, which he doesn't, but he's spoken a little bit, you know, in predetermined ways, not extemporaneously. He says it's a good thing he has them because that's when he finds out what's going on. Namely because I didn't know. He's the perpetrator. He's behind it. He didn't know. And not give info so that stuff can be checked out like the IRS, like Syria, like Benghazi, absolutely blocks handing over information. Right now, remember the Navy Yard shooter, mentally ill, in Washington, D.C., who shot people, was a military area, right? Remember? And D.C. was on lockdown. Nobody knew if it was a terrorist, a nut, or what. He's not allowing the records to be seen of how a person like that could have been hired into that situation to begin with. He's not allowing the Congress to have those records right now as we speak. And by the way, while the news was breaking and on every television screen, and nobody knew how bad it was this another Fort Hood or what, His wife in D.C. at the very moment, same time, was telling people that Obama was going to get his groove on at night with a Latin party they were having while the city was in lockdown. Talk about abandoning things. He started a project to have the health records of veterans more effective and efficiently organized, whatever, through their hospital system. $5 billion was spent on that, and it's just left to go. It got nowhere. It got nowhere. He's purging generals. He's purging generals out of the military. And he's done awful things to the military, too. For example, during the shutdown. And other times, too. He's taken away news feeds. He's taken away sports feeds to people outside the country. He's taken away religious ability to have religious service. He's purging generals, and they're saying that it's getting more and more in the news. The ones that are being purged, you can't speak out. You've got to go along with what he wants, and that's how communism works. The shoe comes down, and it steps on you. At first, it leaves a little mark, but it comes down. You can't talk. You can't think. You have to obey. Remember the Gulf of Mexico? He didn't want to go down there. He stayed away. And his talk about fantasy and unreality, his big reaction to it, never called the head of the company, none of that. Plug the damn hole. Oh, that's very reasonable. That's deep. And what did he say when the website didn't work, which now they're saying he knew completely, that everybody knew, they were told how bad it was. So that's curious too. That's another story I could discuss, but I won't. But he said about that when it was a shame kind of a thing. He said, fix it. And they were going over there saying, fix it. How do you fix come on, that's reasonable too. How do you fix 500 million lines of code? Fix it. Plug the damn hole. He can't walk and talk. He can't walk and chew gum, as the saying goes, at the same time either. But he doesn't want to either. He needs his sports stuff. He needs his golf. He needs his parties. He needs to give speeches. Speeches seem to be a palliative and an elixir, a reinforcer, a reward. It's something he loves. Probably, it's true. Even entertainers will tell you that, They love to hear and have people listen, clap, and, it is addictive. And he also has said, by the way, just for the record, and he has these drone attacks that he carries out, and Malala, the girl that got shot in the head from Afghanistan and was brought to, I forgot which country, to have her head fixed after she suffered a gunshot by the Taliban because she was trying to have girls be in school, and she's world famous now as, a female leader and so forth. She went to the White House, which was off the record, and more things at the White House regular reporters aren't allowed to be in on. He's got his own team. He's the man behind the curtain. But anyway, she went to the White House, and she told him that he's making lots of enemies, which many experts have said. Imagine
bombs from drones
come down and people die. Innocent people die. Imagine. And it's the United States. Imagine what that's, you think it's bringing us more terrorists? You're darn right. Listen to what he said about the drones. He said, I'm great at killing. He disparaged Ben Carson. Oh, remember, you don't know who Ben Carson is. I did speak about him in another show. The pediatric neurosurgeon. And since we got to talk race because we're racist now, African-American, head of neurosurgery for pediatrics at Johns Hopkins, unbelievable. He cannot have had results. This is a guy, he and Herman Cain, they could not have gotten where they got without results. Plain and simple. He criticized the president. Next day, IRS came, reviewed his stuff, found no problems. They said, let's look at the year before that and the year before that. Is it any wonder that the Tea Party is up in arms? And I know they've been called crazy and you're told to hate them. I know. I know. You know, this guy's going to be long gone when the fuel runs out. He has wasted and squandered so much of this country. He stopped NASA. And guess what? I told you this before. Tons of people were of African American heritage who were astronauts in training and other engineers in NASA. He got rid of that program, the space shuttle and all that, to the moon. He got rid of Yucca.
A repository for nuclear waste that the U.S. was working on.
He's getting rid of generals. I mean, there's too much. Too much. And the guy is a bore. He's a total bore, too. But you got to watch. You got to watch. And if you don't know as intricately as I'm telling you right now, or even more, then how can you make a decision of who to vote for, or what you want, and what you should expect, or what you should demand? What you should demand to get. So he'll be gone. And boy, he's going to leave a trail behind him. But can he ever read a speech? Ever notice that Bill Clinton is called in to explain stuff? Sometimes, too. When it gets to be more intricate. Because he's done a very poor job. He's done a very poor job. Because why? Not could he do it? Of course. Should he roll up his sleeves and get with it and do it right? Should have been a magician, because he's an illusionist. He's like a look here guy, always. Oh, he's quick on that. Oh, is he quick? Quicker than you. He should have been a magician, and also his magical thinking. You got to have magical thinking to let this healthcare thing get out of hand like it did, and you got to be in some kind of, you should crawl in a hole and cover yourself. You should be so ashamed when you had all the resources a person could ever need. And you're going to find, too, when he leaves, so much has been let to not take care of, because so many things. He didn't follow the Iraq War. He didn't follow Afghanistan. Months went by. He didn't talk to the general. I'm sorry. If you want to work on your nuclear treaties when all these other needs are there, that's not your prerogative. You become a president to handle the things that get put on your desk when you come into office. And it's too bad if they don't match what you want to do. You don't buck reality unless you're in unreality yourself. So, character disorder. Grandiose sense of self-importance, fantasies of unlimited power and brilliance. He's gone around, I don't know if he does this still, he used to tell people, no matter how much you know, and he certainly doesn't know the other disciplines. I don't know, he knows the Saul Alinsky discipline. He doesn't know the Constitution that well. Not a professor, a lecturer at the University of Chicago. He called himself a professor, and so does everybody else. Having been in that world, I can tell you there's a distinction. Not that he couldn't have been, but because he probably was not interested in that path, but he was a lecturer. But he's told people, I'm the smartest guy. Oh-ho! The smartest guy that got us into all these messes like we're in now, that handled Syria and Benghazi and blah, 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 blah. He told Harry Reid long ago, before he was even running, that he's got a gift, that he's special. This is part of character disorder. He needs excessive admiration. It's called narcissism. He expects automatic compliance with what he says to do and special treatment, takes advantage of others in order to achieve his ends, lacks empathy. Many times he's had to meet with families or survivors of different things that the government is involved in, the parents, the wives, whatever. And they've said, please tell us, like what happened when a Chinook went down with a lot of seals. There's some very curious stuff if you really follow. You got to wonder, is it sabotage or is it a mistake? But anyway, a lot of seals died, and we can't get into a description. Things like this. And then he has to meet with the families or whomever, and he'll say, you can rest assured we'll get to the very bottom of this. And time and again, these people come up and say, he never got back to me. I'm waiting. Arrogant behavior and projection. Everything that he's guilty of, that's projection. He projects it onto you, onto him, onto her, onto you, onto Republicans, onto the Tea Party, onto somebody else in government. Projection. Whatever, or if he's really doing it, he's going to say you're doing it. Whatever he's really doing is what he's going to say you're doing. He's not going to say it's going to be on his mind, but it's projection. He'll say you're doing it. He'll say you won't negotiate. You're holding me hostage. He's the guy that announced, I won't negotiate. He's the guy that said, I won. What kind of tone do you think that sets? I know they play games with each other on each side, but he has been absolutely a brick wall of coming together. He can't stand people either. There's been an article or in the book somewhere I read about, too, he can't stand Bill Clinton, which is well known, too. He can't bear their company. He likes to be alone. He can't bear. He doesn't like people. He's joyless. He's not a gregarious social person. But boy, in terms of greatness behind the curtain on a big stage, he's in his prime. I worry what somebody does who has this kind of disorder when the stuff hits the fan. That's a worrisome thing to me. He can think, but he's not very deep. I heard somebody say he has a superficial mind. He is not deep.
This has been the fourth of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. Please tune in again for more of this lecture. Thank you. This is the fifth of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. We enter a lecture in progress.
I remember, he's so pro-abortion. Abortions for everyone. Let's have a female have 8 abortions in a row. What's the problem? Let's kill babies. He said kill full terms 2 times when he was a state senator. Full-term borns. What to do with them? Call them a fetus. Give them the axe. No problem. Kill well-developed babies. Kill the brain, kill the heart in the womb. No problem. Kill them everywhere. So, having this opinion, he was on early on, and before he was president, he was on this interview with a pastor of a megachurch in LA. And different non-political questions were asked. And the guy asked him, what's your view on abortion? He said, it's above my pay grade. A superficial mind. A guy who calls for the killing of the fetus, full-born. Call it a fetus. Means gotta go. Morality. His morality, behind all of this, it's more like a vengeance. And I believe the vengeance is to class. The vengeance is somewhat to race. The vengeance is sort of payback to the most difficult life he probably had, I would think. With his very disruptive, and here's a guy living amongst white people as a black person a number of decades ago, to boot, on top of everything else. Not easy, but like I say, a country is at stake. Somebody's disorders cannot be blanketing the country and everybody else, fall under it. And also, he believes he's right. Needless to say, from everything I've said. He can't, what's in his mind, and he cannot be convinced another way. It's very hard. His mind is not flexible and free and deep thinking. In the country, communism is a virus. It's sort of like Jesus freaks, in a way, where every time they talk to you, they got to tell you, Jesus made me do it and Jesus will do it for you. I mean, they never can do it. They can't just say, oh, this burger tastes really great. What are you doing later? No, later you should go see Jesus, blah, blah, blah. Communism is viral like that, too. Once you're infected with it, sometimes people get out of it, but boy, it infiltrates everything you do. Shady past, I'm not going to get into that today. Time is going on. All the things that we don't know about him, all the things that were shown, even though people poo-pooed it and said you're crazy, courts wouldn't take the challenges to some of the documents of his past. They wouldn't take them. And people would not go look at what people were saying are the issues with his documents of his past life, or lack thereof of documents. And, you know, he said he was a community organizer. I don't know how much good he did at that. When the kid was hit with the railroad, when a young boy who was an honor student from that area, Hyde Park, I believe it would have been, in Chicago, was walking home one day, some gang kids beat him to death with railroad ties. And I remember Reverend Eugene Rivers, right here from Roxbury, was on Fox News, practically leaning over the counter, saying, President Obama, you get over there right now, because of how bad things are in Chicago. And some of his people, and maybe he was there, yet nobody went to that area. Nobody went to say, do you think do you think you might have made a difference by going over there and saying, you kids, or even taking the money that he's so wasted and saying, here, dudes, I'll set you up with this if you'll do it. Do you know when that shutdown happened? Do you know the kinds of things that were going on? Well, I don't know if I have time to. All the horrible things that were done to people during the shutdown on purpose, because the agenda was to make it hurt the people as much as possible, to bring the Republicans to their knees. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? Maybe I'll have a chance, but I like what Tavis Smiley said about the president's administration a short while ago, that persons of black skin color have never been so economically bad off as during this administration. But does he support him? You betcha. Did the president not go to an invitation of Tavis Smiley at one of those conferences he held? You betcha. He did not go. But Tavis is behind him. Bully in chief. He tells people, he actually told people from the podium, don't watch Fox News. He used to try to tell them that. He said, if they bring knives, we'll bring guns. The guy who's like, supposedly this administration is like, well, now you can't have even a picture of a gun. He said, hurt your enemy, punish your enemy. He called the Tea Party arsonists, terrorists. Who's the one that says, I'm great at killing?
Obama.
He says, I won. He said, I won't negotiate. Nasty feeling towards people, joyless, vengeful. All right, here are some of the things that were shut down to people during the shutdown. Supposedly, these concepts came from Valerie Jarrett. The Vets Memorial, these 90-year-old vets in their wheelchairs came, World War II. They took them, they struggled, and they got the barricades down. The next day, they put them up even more. And it's a free, there's no police there, it's a free open area. They barricaded them to be able to get close to it. He deprived the military of entertainment and sports. You know, this was the fiscal idea of sequestration. This is what he's going to kill. He deprived people to visit the White House. And even I saw, okay, because race is always a player here, some African-American children were saying, can't we visit the White House? Do you think they might have liked to have gone in to see it? Finally, it's reopened on, I think, a more limited basis, but he stopped the commissaries where military people get to shop. He stopped people from looking at the Grand Canyon. He took people out of private homes when their homes were on leased land that the government owns, elderly people. He didn't let them get to Mount Rushmore, and he actually, which is not his prerogative, put up cones on the highway so that they couldn't even put their car in a spot so that they could look at Mount Rushmore. That's your president. One of the park rangers said, we're told to make it hurt as much as possible. And he's lawless. Things he's doing are really illegal, like even with the healthcare law. When he makes a new change to it, by rights, by constitution, it has to go through a legislative process. But nobody dare speak. This is the sainted one. This is the anointed one. This is the African American one. This is the character disordered one, which has nothing to do, of course, with race. But it certainly has to do with how he grew up and maybe some genes of... And I'll tell you this is an outrageous thing. Cracker, get off the TV. Put a picture of this guy, Frank Marshall, or I believe is his name, the communist mentor he had as a young boy. Put his picture next to him and put his Kenyan father next to him. And then see which one looks like Barack Obama. He's anti-female. Romer, the economist, female who worked in the White House, said that and then took it back, but did say it earlier, a couple of years ago. The women were just passed right over. Hillary, of course, Hillary is sort of his rival, definitely his rival, but you never saw Hillary the way you saw other secretaries of state on TV. He's letting carry on a little more. You never saw her out there as the face of the administration. You knew she was somewhere in the world, and boo to Hillary while I'm at it too, who got nothing done as a Secretary of State, and is going to come out with this same trash about a war on women. Women, get your act together. There's no war on you. You got to wise up. And I'll tell you, to have 8 abortions and all kinds of contraception and sex with every male, every penis that you can see, you're making a war on yourself. It's just, I read recently too, all his cabinet members are out of the loop. He's just got this close group that he will dare to listen to. Cabinet members. You never see them. Only him. Only him. And Biden's probably there because he's such a goofball, so it makes the president look great. But usually you have your vice president helping out. You would see all the administration people usually you would see every night on the news. You don't see that. Talk about where we are in the world now, too. Look at our international situation. Karzai won't sign right now. We're in a disadvantage. Why should we, whether you're white or black or have gripes or don't have gripes, and we should have gripes, it's not a resolved issue in this country, and it certainly hasn't been addressed during this presidency, the issue of race. But no matter who you are, why should we give away what we have? The benefits that we have. And the means that we can improve upon and had but are getting worse. Why? Why would you disadvantage yourself? On purpose. Brazil didn't visit the White House. Canceled. Very major country these days. Poland betrayed. when he never told them he wasn't going to put a certain anti-missile thing that was due to go into Poland. Didn't even bother to tell them. They found out in the news. France said, what is this screwy guy, Sarkozy? And another time when he was in France, and Sarkozy, I think, was still there with that model wife he has, whoever she is, I forgot her name. They were invited for their one night in France, in Paris, to dine with the
president
of France. It was reported Michel O said no, they didn't go. Egypt burns him in effigy. They can't stand him. Israel, totally split out in, now they're at odds publicly. Russia, he was so good to Russia. There's expressions that are filthy that would fit this occasion that I'm not allowed to say, unfortunately. But what he hasn't done for Putin, oh, my Russia, we're reset with Russia. We couldn't be further apart from Russia now, playing us. Saudi Arabia that never speaks out publicly. A couple of weeks ago, the king publicly called him a fool across the world over his situation with Syria, that whole ridiculousness. Germany, there's a book out about Angela Merkel, and she endorses it. She was at a book signing. She didn't write it, but she was there. And this is what she says of Obama. And, at the G20, they're just like avoiding him. He is a queer fellow. He is a queer fellow. She called him so peculiar, so unapproachable, so lacking in warmth. He doesn't relate. Because it's all in his head. When you're the greatest, when you're the smartest, when you're going to tell people what to do, when everything that you're really doing you put on them, you're not exactly going to be an easygoing, gregarious person. He's absent from so much, avoidant. Let me quickly, I'm running out of time, I won't even tell you what they are, but these are just a few of the lies that are so serious. The situation about Blago and whether he was involved. Remember that one? Al-Qaeda, that Al-Qaeda's not a threat anymore. The narrative, remember that one? Fast and Furious, guns go to Mexico, over the border, on purpose. The Scotland bomber being released that he said he didn't know about it, finds out a letter he wrote, go ahead and do it. When he speaks with the Catholics, he says to them, don't worry,
contraception
won't be on your situation with insurance. What does he do? Puts it right on and tell them, eat it. Sequestration, he says the Republicans did this. He made up the idea and the Republicans said, are you kidding? He said, he says, please do the sequestration. That was a year earlier. He said, but I'll never let it come to pass if you do it. But when it came to pass, he said, the Republicans did it. You're going to not like this one, but I'd advise people to go see what are the issues with some of his old documents, the ones that he purportedly put to rest. Healthcare, all the lies, needless to say. Bin Laden and the SEALs say how it went down and what happened, and I don't know all the whole story, but they say what he's saying isn't true. He says we're not losing jobs because of healthcare, that businesses aren't, he said, no way, that's not proven, that businesses aren't letting people go.
or making jobs part-time.
Because of the new healthcare costs and uncertainties. Benghazi, a terrible, terrible, chilling thing, where an embassy, a consulate, is taken over by a terrorist attack, and the military and the special ops are told to stand down. Then guess what? No one's been able to interview the survivors of Benghazi, and they had to sign disclosure. He said, no disclosure documents were signed. Now it's found out. 2 times they made them sign that they won't talk about Benghazi.
The Navy Yard shooting.
That he's not allowing now you to know how, they won't allow anyone to see how a guy like that can be hired for a military job. Fort Hood, I will never forget the Gulf of Mexico, which is a crime against the world, God, and nature. And I'm not saying he's responsible for it. It's a whole complicated story. But he wanted no part of it. He should have been, this environmentalist, this green guy, he should have been down there instantly. He should have been on the phone with the executives, etc., etc. He was hiding from it, trying to pretend it didn't exist. Fort Hood, I'll never forget watching him live, speaking before an American Indian audience. He gets the news. 33 people mowed down. I forgot how many actually died, right there in cold blood. Laughing and joking after he heard that news before he comes and tells the people and just tells it like, so what? And it got to the point where Hassan, who's been on trial, had to say, because to this day they don't call him a terrorist, they call it workplace violence. He himself had to say, I'm a jihadist. Get that through your head. Sandy, so many people still living in shabby circumstances, one rooms, somewhere, lost their homes. I ask you, and I'm not favorable to Mitt Romney, name anybody else, McCain, you name it, Hillary for that matter. Would they be still there if they were in charge instead of Barry Obama? And guess which ones are? The less fortunate. Okay. I gave you most of what I wanted to say. Boy, could we do better. Anyone interested to talk about race, contact me, please. We may have a show about it. I'll leave you with this. If you're wondering what your kids could do, because college is not the best deal anymore. Organic farming, I've seen programs where the kids live on the farms, get their food and board, and some small stipend. Nothing could be more therapeutic, nothing could be more healthy, uplifting, and have promise of a future as organic farming. There are ways. And how much would children love a horse or to feed cow? It works wonders. And to know the land and how to grow stuff, do something, be competent. Women, dig yourself. There's no war on you. It's up to us to get our act together. Cut it out. Love your body. Love who you are. Don't try to be something that you're not genetically. Be who you are. Make the most of it. Work on it. You land where you land in life. Work it through. And don't fall for these misogynistic
government
ads that now are coming out that talk about your lady parts. May I please puke? Vaginas out there. Be proud. And don't sleep with everybody, and know who you are. You're beautiful. Being a woman is a beautiful thing. And it's not the same as being a man. And being a man is a beautiful thing. Deal with what you are. Don't hate yourself. And remember, too, finally, that children learn by example. So whatever way you're acting around them, being irritated, saying, come over here, or yelling, or whatever, that's what your children will become. Thank you very much. I hope you tune in again for Toward a Quality of Life. Okay. All right. Can we see it? Well,
you want me to zoom out? I can.
There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to see the young lovely ladies that worked as the staff in the control room to help with this show, and they have been marvelous to me and to the show. This is Lexi, and this is Melinda. So, both graduates of college. So if anybody has some nice jobs, let us know. Yeah! Okay. So thank you very much, and it's been a wonderful shoot because people have been so nice and so able. Thank you.
This has been the fifth of a multi-part series about our pervasively mendacious and untrustworthy President number 44. Please tune in again for more of this lecture. Thank you.
You just go right up it because it's here and it's now. Just move every bone to a cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow. Cosmic powwow.
Obama